Imagine waking up one morning to the sound of thunder. Nothing unusual. But when you look out the window, what is falling from the sky is not water. It is a dark, bubbling, sticky liquid. It has the color of caramel, the smell of sugar, and the acidity of something you know perfectly well. It is raining Coca-Cola. At first, the scene is almost funny. Children run into the street with their hands open. Adults record videos. The world becomes a giant advertisement. But after a few hours, the spectacle turns strange. The streets begin to smell like vinegar. Cars become glued to the asphalt. Birds stop flying. And people start to understand that what seemed like a miracle is more of a curse than a soft drink. The question is inevitable. What if it rained Coca-Cola? Not just a shower, but all the water in the hydrological cycle turned into that dark, effervescent liquid. What would happen to your body, to the cities, to the earth? Today we are going to find out. According to science. Welcome to What If Science. To understand the disaster, we first have to understand what exactly Coca-Cola is. Not the brand, but the formula. Coca-Cola is basically water, sugar, phosphoric acid, caffeine, caramel coloring, and dissolved carbon dioxide. That combination of acidity and sugar is what makes it unique. Its pH is around 2.5, similar to vinegar or lemon juice. It contains about 106 grams of sugar per liter. And those bubbles we love so much are pressurized gas that escapes as soon as it is released. The first problem, and the most immediate one, is evaporation. The water cycle works because water evaporates, rises into the atmosphere, condenses into clouds, and falls again. But Coca-Cola is not pure water. When you try to evaporate it, the water leaves first, leaving behind a dense, sticky residue, a molasses of sugar, acid, and coloring. The oceans, the lakes, the rivers would all slowly turn into a thick syrup. The atmosphere would barely be able to form clouds. The rain would quickly cease, and the little that did fall would be increasingly concentrated, more acidic, more viscous. The soil would be the first to die. A liter of Coca-Cola has a pH of 2.5. Normal acid rain has a pH of about 4.3. Coca-Cola is almost 100 times more acidic. Watering a field with it would not nourish the plants. It would dissolve the nutrients in the soil, destroy the microorganisms, and burn the roots. Within days, the crops would turn yellow, then brown, then collapse into a paste of decomposed cellulose. The forests would not fare any better. The leaves would fall, the bark would soften, and the trees would literally drown in a syrup that clogs their pores and ferments on their roots. And then there are the insects. Insects breathe through tiny tubes in their exoskeletons called spiracles. A sugary liquid like Coca-Cola does not just block those tubes, it glues them shut. Once the sugar crystallizes, the insect is entombed in a caramel coffin. Flies, ants, bees, butterflies, they would all disappear in a matter of hours. Without pollinators, the rest of the plant kingdom collapses in a domino effect. A world without insects is a world without flowers, without fruits, without life as we know it. The oceans would not be a refuge either. Salt water and Coca-Cola would mix into a warm, acidic, carbonated soup. The phytoplankton, responsible for producing half the oxygen we breathe, would die in a matter of days. The coral reefs would dissolve in the acid. The fish would suffocate, not just from the lack of oxygen, but because their gills would be coated in a layer of sugar and phosphoric acid. The ocean would become a dark, flat, sweet-smelling graveyard. And while all this is happening, something even more terrifying would start to brew in the remains. The sugar. 106 grams of sugar per liter is a feast for bacteria and fungi. The whole planet would start to ferment. The water-soil mixture, now a nutrient-rich broth, would begin to bubble not with carbon dioxide from the drink, but with methane from the decomposition. The smell would be unbearable, a mix of acetic acid, rotting fruit, and damp earth. The planet would smell like a landfill left in the sun. In the cities, the infrastructure would collapse. Cars would stop, not just because the syrup would clog the engines, but because the asphalt itself would dissolve. The phosphoric acid in the Coca-Cola would attack the carbonates in the concrete and the metals in the bridges. The roads would become sticky traps. The buildings would weaken at their foundations. The pipes, designed to carry water, would clog with crystallized sugar in a matter of hours. The taps would spit out a thick, brown paste, and then simply fall silent. And what about you? What about your body? If you were caught in the rain, the first thing you would feel would be an unbearable stickiness. Your skin, covered in a layer of sugar, would attract insects desperate for moisture. Your hair would become a solid helmet. Your eyes would burn from the phosphoric acid. If you drank it, the initial sensation would be pleasant. Then the dehydration would begin. Your body, needing water, would receive a liquid that does not hydrate. Your kidneys would collapse trying to filter a syrup with the density of crude oil. You would literally die of thirst while drinking. But here is the most fascinating scientific twist. If the reign of Coca-Cola were truly global and permanent, it would create a new kind of atmosphere. The methane released by the global fermentation would be a greenhouse gas 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. The planet would heat up rapidly. But at the same time, the cloud cover would collapse because the syrup would not evaporate. The heat would become trapped, but without the cooling effect of white clouds reflecting sunlight. The result would be a pressure cooker, a dark, hot, humid planet covered in a sticky, fermenting film, with an atmosphere of methane and water vapor that would roast the surface. In the long term, over millions of years, something unexpected might happen. The colossal deposits of sugar, now buried under layers of sediment and dead matter, would slowly fossilize. The pressure and heat of the Earth would transform that planetary caramel layer into something new. A strange form of coal, rich in carbon, but with a chemical fingerprint unlike anything in current geological history. Future geologists, if there were any, would find a thin, dark, sweet layer in the rocks, and they would know that here, in the distant past, something deeply strange happened. So, the next time you open a can of Coca-Cola, look at it with different eyes. What you are holding is not just a drink. It is a chemical weapon so powerful that, if it replaced the rain, it would bring down an entire civilization. But in a glass, on a summer afternoon, it is simply delicious. If this journey through the end of the world made you look at your soda with a little more respect, subscribe and hit the bell. At What If Science, we explore the limits of the possible, with science as our only compass. What would happen if the oceans were made of orange juice? Or if the clouds were made of cotton candy? I'll read you in the comments.